So it's time to do it. We are going to do a full run Calobra bottom to top. Let's go. Welcome back to the What Life. That last speed ramp was the start of the segment officially, and we don't finish until we get to the top and head between the rocks at the summit. Guys, I'm going to give you a full rundown on the full Calobra climb. I'll give you some stats on it in a second, but let me throw some details about me so that you can relate this back to yourself. I weigh about 78 kg. My bike is a Winspace. It's an aero bike. It's got 67mm wheels on, 28mm or 28cc tires on it, the Challenge Criterium RSs. I have two bidons that are pretty much full of water. I didn't really drink very much for this day. Like I said, bike weighs 7.9 kg. Obviously, I got a tool bag on there, a few other bits. So I was not running super light for this. This is just a, for all intensive purposes, a tourist run up Calobra. So that might help you kind of figure it out. I also hold 308 watts, which is just below 4 watts per kg, and I finished this run in 36 minutes 45. This was actually a 30-minute power PB for me, so I'm pretty happy with it nonetheless. But there's the stats on who I am, how I'm doing this. So you could probably go a little bit lighter on things like the bike. I could have left my bidons at the top. All the small little things that might end up making a difference. I had two bidons pretty much full. I had my back jersey was full of stuff. And obviously I have a couple of cameras that I'm carrying to shoot and create this whole run myself. The route or the segment, let me give you the breakdown on it. 5.86 miles, 9.5 kilometers long, 650 meters of vert. And if you work in feet, that's 2,160 feet. Average grade of just over 7%. And the record time is held by Thomas Pidcock in 22 minutes 46. So be sure to keep that in mind when you see 22 minutes 46 come up on the screen and I am at nowhere near the top. That would be the time that Tom Pidcock managed to finish it. So my goal for this was to try and hold that kind of magic 4 watts per kg. This is actually towards middle end of March, and you can see how busy the road is. Also, this is lunchtime, so I think it's like 12:15 that I started the run. Obviously in March it's a bit cooler, so if you are doing this over the the high season, peak summer, bear in mind it's going to be scorchio if you decided to do this at lunchtime. We left our villa at about 9:45 in the morning. So we could have left a little bit earlier. We bowled over. We didn't bowl over too quickly. It took us about an hour and a bit to get there. A couple of climbs to get there. Drop down, and then you go and head up and do Calobra. So that's some info for you so that you can kind of stay on top of things. But bear that in mind that if you're out there in the height of summer, it will probably be a lot busier. You can see the coaches coming down now in the summer. That's obviously going to play more of a role. But I got quite lucky with my run in that obviously it's 12 o'clock in the day. It's reasonably busy, but nothing gets in the way. As I said, the goal was to try and hold that little magic 310 watts per kg, 310 watts, which would be 4 watts per kg for me. So obviously my watts bounce around a bit. I'm not particularly good at holding that kind of super steady kind of watts. It's not really, guys, I am I don't want to say hobby cyclist because I put a lot of effort into it, but I've never raced. I've never done like an official race or anything like that. Just tons of sportives, and racing is something I am going to move into, but at the moment it's just not what I do. So I'm not kind of a TT specialist who can just sit at a wattage. So what I was trying to do though is when the gradient ramps up a little bit, I was trying to just put a little bit more effort in. I was very happily getting out of the saddle. In actual fact, the bits that I probably struggled with more was when the road or the gradient flattens out ever so slightly, because then I was just kind of sat in the saddle and finding it hard to generate the watts that I needed or the power that I needed. So, it's that kind of magic kind of relationship between your cadence and your wattage. That's what I was kind of struggling with. So let me give you a breakdown on what I'm running in terms of gears and bikes and everything like that. So I've got a Winspace T1550 which is, like I said, it's an aero build, weighs 7.9 kg. I am running a Sram Force group set on it, which has a 3310 rear cassette, and I think I'm 4835 at the front on the big ring. And I rode the big ring the entire way up. I didn't have to change out. Obviously, that larger cassette at the back using the SRAM was such a benefit for being able to do something like this, where in actual fact it doesn't really ever get super steep, and if it is, it's only on the switchbacks and you can just jump out the saddle and keep the power on. I kind of, I don't know why, but I always think that when the gradient ramps up a little bit, that's the point when I try and kind of put my power down, because obviously if you're moving at like 6 miles an hour over 4 miles an hour on the steeper bits, then I feel like you gain more time than if you are moving, you know, at 16 miles an hour over 14 miles an hour when it is flatter. So I don't know whether that kind of makes sense, in that these shorter, sharper bits are actually the points where you can gain like a second a lot easier, well, I mean, with a little kick. Obviously, the one thing I didn't want to do was kind of go into that red zone. And if you check out my heart rate on the right, that was something that I paid like quite a lot of attention to. So I've got a nice small little IGP bike computer on the front of my bike, and I had it registered for, or the screen that I had on for the entire climb was quite simply cadence, heart rate, and power. That was all I was paying attention to. I didn't actually know what my running time was until I got to the top and kind of stopped my watch and then saved the activity. So I had no idea how I was performing on the segment, which maybe if I was to do it again, I'd probably change and try and have a running clock time, because I've got no reference to it. You know, I've never actually done this climb before, so having a running reference time kind of would have meant nothing to me, being my first time riding this bottom to top. But this is certainly one of the more iconic locations for the climbs. You go through this, I don't really want to call it a cave because I'm pretty sure it's open topped, but you get this like stone wall, which was very cool. And anytime I got to like one of these like iconic locations, you can see me dig out a bit more power. Also, because it's one way, it's kind of just makes me feel like I want to kind of push through it, so that, you know, nothing really kind of gets in my way or stops me from having to like continue this nice, easy, steady run. My biggest fear was kind of coming up to like a bus and then not being able to pass, because, you know, for whatever reason, that just would have kind of mentally, I think, annoyed me, even though it probably would have only cost me, you know, 5 or so seconds, which again, you know, let's circle this all the way back round to the fact that I'm just a cyclist from Buckinghamshire who is trying to do this and make a little YouTube out of it. There is absolutely no relevance to whether I do well or bad to anyone outside of myself. So the actual kind of route, or I think if you look at like the topology of it, you don't really get to any of the switchbacks until you get very near the top of the climb. So the first maybe half of the climb, certainly in terms of elevation, is all done on like reasonably straight and steady roads. So the bottom of the climb is it's a really unique shape, and someone actually told me that when they created, or the architect, I don't want to call him an architect, the engineer, sorry, who created or helped create and build the actual road down to the port, used, I think he said, used donkeys or donkey trails, where they basically released a load of donkeys at the top, and they were very good at navigating a very efficient route down from the summit down to the port, and then they helped, or they used that to help build and generate the road system that is now in place and has become the infamous Calobra climb. And it's also the same engineer that has done a ton of different roads and routes throughout the whole island. I think there's like a huge amount of history to it, and now that I'm talking about it, I actually wish I knew more. But that was kind of something I didn't actually learn until afterwards, but it kind of makes sense, because you know, it does feel like it's a very efficient route. It's not an unnecessary kind of loads and loads of switchbacks just to get up the climb, or just to make its way through the hills. All the, you know, it feels like it's very efficient. So some of these roads actually towards the bottom are very straight. The gradient is very, I want to say like lenient or gentle, but still enough to kind of help you kind of maintain, you can maintain a good speed, but you have to keep that dig on. We come into 10 minutes, which for me, you can just see my heart rate nudging into 160. My tempo heart rate, you know, for this kind of climb, I want to sit around 160, 162. My HR max would probably be a 174 to a 175 if that was like if I did like an all-out 2 minute effort, I think 3 minute effort. I'm 41 years old, so you know, this is all kind of relative to me, so use that as you will for you guys. But I did find it quite hard to, you know, just stay steady with it, and maybe I could have pushed a little bit harder on the bottom end. But I'll also say that it's not that I didn't, you know, I rode this pretty steady, but I definitely had a few points towards the top when the heat got a little bit higher that I struggled a little bit. So this is the first person within our group. This is little Debbie cycling. She's out there just smashing her effort. And this was me just saying hi as I kind of went past a few of the guys from our group. We had a 6 or 7 person group. A couple of people went up before and a couple of people went up afterwards. So it was actually quite nice to see a few friendly faces on the way up, which kind of helps spur you on, because if you see someone ahead, you can kind of just push that little bit harder. Here are a few of the coaches. Like, this is such a good example. You can see that they're stopped to let cars by, and obviously that becomes a bit of a hazard if you are trying to like really hammer a climb. If you come up to a point where a coach is trying to let cars past and you get caught up in it all, it can really hamper your run. So this is why people often say get in there nice and early. I get quite lucky with this, as that car just makes it through as I am bowling through. I don't have to take my foot off the gas at all, but the guys in front of me were obviously affected by that, and that kind of gave me that chance to kind of come up and catch them well, pretty quickly as you see me come past. This is actually Martin, who was our bike guide with the Bike Villas travel guys. He was the guy that was just creating the routes, sending us routes, and just organized the whole thing for us in terms of like how to get around the island, how to do everything, which became very handy. In the evening, he'd just ping us a GPS, we'd whack it onto our bike computers, and then in the morning, he'd take the lead and just kind of basically show us and take us around the island. And then obviously today was a Calobra climb day, and this was like the entire point of today. Again, guys, another bus coming down, so you know, please do be careful, because when we descended down, we didn't actually pass that many buses, maybe a couple, but heading back up, and this is just after lunch, like 12, like I said, 12:15, 12:30, you can kind of see just how busy it is. I'm not sure how many buses have passed me, but there were certainly like 5 or 6. And in actual fact, I got very lucky in the sense that I wasn't actually passed by any buses as we get further up towards the switchbacks. So, you know, pick your poison, try and be a little bit clever with what time of day you go, what time of year you do this, because if you go at lunchtime in the baking hot, like June, Mallorcan sunshine, you're going to get cooked. You might get a few buses, you know, come past you on the switchbacks, and it's going to annoy you. So get there nice and early, and then you can actually avoid some of the buses. Well, you avoid the busy time, and it's a little bit cooler. So if I was to do this again, or when I do this again, hopefully in the summer, I will definitely be going earlier, trying to get there earlier, and maybe get my run in at like 9:30 in the morning, which would mean I'd have to leave at like 8:30, dependent on where you're staying on the island. So these are the long straights, and they kind of feel like they drag on, but this is the first part of the climb. As we come into, what, 14, 15 minutes, this is the first part of the climb where you actually start seeing the rest of the climb, or like the big kind of iconic locations for the climb, which is the switchbacks that get closer and closer to the top, which is kind of very cool, but also like that kind of stark reminder of like how much further you have to go. These were the bits that I actually struggled on. I will be honest with you, my RPM is pretty steady, 80 RPM. I'm not a super high spinner. I don't often ride over 90 RPM. You know, if I'm doing like a Zwift race or a race in general, and there was a kick, I'd happily kind of go up to 100 RPM, but I don't really hold that. I don't hold over 90 RPM very often. So 80, 85 is like a very steady cadence for me, but you can also see that my wattage just wasn't great. I was like 270, 280, and I always get that constant reminder that you kind of got to nudge it up a little bit. but I was struggling. It's kind of on this like gentle gradient. I'm only referring to it as gentle relative to some of the other points in the climb. But this is the kind of these long sections, and this has been a very long straight section, kind of probably the longest, straightest section of the climb, which is maybe what, like 2/4 of the way up. It's kind of that just before you get to halfway. It is really long, it's straight, and I found this section quite hard to kind of like maintain my speed. I definitely feel like I'm not good at it. This is not my forte, kind of that gentle like 5-6%. And just kind of maintaining like a really high speed. I just couldn't do that. What I'm quite good at is getting out of the saddle when the gradient ramps up a little bit, and then just being able to like put down little digs and kind of slightly bigger efforts. So you'll see that when it comes to the switchbacks and the corners, I'm out the saddle, I'm able to like put my weight through the pedals and kind of generate a bit more force, which hopefully I think just moves me around the corners a little bit quicker. And that's where I was trying to make up a little bit of my time, knowing that in actual fact these like straights here are actually probably the points where I was losing time, or well, it certainly felt that way anyway. It gets a little bit hotter, or kind of as you get higher, obviously you get a little bit hotter. Like I said, what was it, 650 meters of climbing, so you do get a few degrees change, certainly from the bottom of the climb to the top, and that's something you're going to want to be aware of. I actually don't think I took a drink from my bidon the entire way up. Not necessarily by design or by choice, but it was quite cool. Like I said, we were kind of, what was it, like late March, so it wasn't particularly like super hot. I think maybe like 19, 20, 21 degrees, although at the top it definitely felt like it could be a little bit warmer. But I didn't drink anything, so ultimately I probably didn't need my bidons. I've seen people drop their bidons before. They kind of, you know, they drop them at the top and then kind of go and do the climb and then come collect them, and they just carry absolutely like the bare essentials. So you know, people will just like leave their bidons and some snacks at the top and take maybe a gel or two. We're coming up to what I was hoping was going to be like the halfway point. I was aiming for a 35-minute, and that was based on nothing but just pure imagination and wishfulness. I didn't actually have anything to base this on. I just knew that 35 minutes would be quite a good time, and I was kind of hoping that if I could hold kind of 310 watts that I would get up in 35, but unfortunately for me, that just didn't happen. I ended up with a 36:45, but coming into that 17.5-minute point, this is roughly kind of halfway up the climb, and you can already see like quite how much left of this I have to go. The summit being kind of just up towards the top left as we kind of come round. But I'm doing everything I can. My heart rate is kind of doing that thing where it slowly edges up and up and up. So we started around 156. We're now up into that kind of tempo zone, which is 162 to 164. But again, I'm starting to hold a slightly better kind of watt average as we come through like the middle / higher section of this climb. I don't know why, just like a little bit kind of that 7% just as a slightly bigger rider, just I can put a bit more force through the pedals. So even though I might not be as efficient or moving as quickly as someone that is probably like a ton lighter than me, for me I just feel like I struggle around that kind of 5-6%, but you know, 7-8% I can put the power down. But obviously being heavier, I don't think I move relatively quicker, but still it kind of feels good, and the entire effort is just based on, you know, how much can I put into this. This is hands down where we get into the best part of the climb, and you have to go through you know, half the climb of suffering, where it starts at the bottom, and the road quality, guys, is pretty good, but it's not flawless. So as you come like higher up the climb, you know, pay attention to that. You'll see like, you know, tons of cracks, tons of like uneven road surfaces. So there are, within obviously Mallorca, there's tons of like fantastic, really well new fresh paved roads. If you get a chance to do the descent into Soler from effectively the top of Calobra, you know, that's like, I think it's like 10 or 12 kilometers of just pure descending. It took us 19 minutes of just absolute hammering a descent, which was fantastic, and the road quality on that is like amazing. But obviously this is a very well trodden tourist network, and to repave or to redo this road, you know, would be a huge or at a huge cost of the tourist industry. It's just, I just don't think they could do it. So although the road is fantastic, you know, in terms of, you know, being able to ride it and the view and everything like that, it's not without its flaws. So think about that when you're deciding on your tire pressure, because, you know, effectively if a road is dead smooth and like perfect road conditions, then running a slightly higher tire pressure is probably better. But, you know, ultimately what I was thinking, even though it's a climb and you're not moving as quickly, you know, you can kind of see the effects, or that, you know, just so many people going down this, the big buses that go down it have on this road, because it is kind of broken up, and some of the corners towards the top, you're kind of like moving in and out of just, you know, a not great road surface. It's not, you know, guys, I am being a little bit picky on that, because, you know, you ride some of the country lanes in the UK and they are absolutely damn terrible, whereas I take this road any day of the week. But if we're going to be nitty gritty about it and just kind of dive into the particulars, you can just see that the road itself is just not perfect. So if you're going to do your tyres and you're going to be serious about this and you're trying to pinch a few seconds, as I come up to Nikki, and she's riding an she's got a beautiful S-Works SL7, and she's hammering. And Nikki actually has won the Mallorca 312. So you know, she's a very accomplished cyclist, and she's returning to cycling after having a baby. So Nix, great to see you out there. She's part of our group, and it was like a nice little bonus to pass or get to the opportunity to pass you towards the top, because it definitely helped spur me on seeing someone that I knew. Again, guys, look at the road surface, not 100% perfect. You can see kind of the points that you have to kind of move and avoid. It's not, yeah, again, I'm not blaming anyone, I'm not saying anything, it's just, it is what it is. Be aware of that. You probably might get tempted to kind of, and you can see my watts kick up around these corners, like 400, 500 watts. You probably get quite tempted to kind of work your way across for these corners. I know that's something that Ed Laverack did when he was doing his one, or certainly that was the impression he gave, was that he went super early so that when he was doing his effort, he could pick, you know, he's more able to pick any line that he wanted to. I didn't want to do that. Obviously, I was quite cautious about moving to the other side of the road on some of these switchbacks. Just quite simply knowing that there were other road users out there, other people cycling down at speed. You know, I didn't want to be that guy that's like trying to cut corners, especially the left-handers, just to try and like save maybe a second. You know, I am quite conscious about it. You know, if we're being real about it, you know, I'm aiming for 35 minutes. You know, I am certainly not within the realms of special or golden boy. I don't think of myself that way. Saying that though, guys, I do think I cut this corner slightly as a few cyclists come down. So, you know, I am a little bit cheeky about it, but I'm not like moving right over to the left-hand side of the road. I'm just trying to like pick my line slightly carefully. And perhaps if you were to do it, look, there we go, left, and then a bike comes along. Sorry, I do apologize, dude. But I wasn't trying to do that. I wasn't like trying to aggressively do that and trying to like be that guy that's like, oh, right, I've got to try and like save every inch of the road. But I think if you went early enough, you know, you would have the opportunity to do that. As I said, guys, I got really lucky, or I guess I am quite lucky on this top section, because this is where the switchbacks are. And you can see that on the gradient chart, that, you know, you can see the switchbacks coming in and out. So it was quite nice to not have to kind of worry about any buses, and I got quite lucky with the cars. Like no car kind of like comes around a switchback as I'm going up it. So that's something for you guys to think about, is just, like I said, I've said it a couple of times, pick your time reasonably well, or do what you can to try and make it fit in with your life and your group. But just be aware that if you're coming down, or if you're coming up this and a bus is coming down, you know, it can ruin your rhythm, kind of ruin your kind of, I guess, vibe to doing it, and it can probably get in your head a little bit. Let's say you lose like 5-10 seconds, you'll probably in your head tell you that, oh no, I lost 30-40 seconds because of a bus, when the reality is, it, you know, you might only be costing you 5 or 10, but in your head you'll just kind of end up kind of screwing it over and over again, and the reality is that you probably kind of maybe like mentally give up a little bit before you get to the top. This top section though is absolutely astounding, and we're not, you know, not a million miles away from the top. But at the same time, this is just like you put all the hard work in to get to like this point onwards, and it's just like glorious riding. There's a few sections here, including the big photo opportunity. They have like photographers, I guess they make a business out of it, where they just sit on a couple of the corners and just snap your photo all day long and take pics of you. So you get one, you can get one on the way down, get one back on the way up, and you get kind of like a nice, awesome memento if you dive onto the website and pick them up. And I think they're like, they range between like the lower quality of like €4.50 up to like €7 per photo. So they probably make a bucket of money during the summer just kind of taking people's pics, and then people can download them online. But that's something to be aware of, guys, because make sure that you are out the saddle, pushing hard as you go up the climb, whether you've kind of given up on your effort or whether you manage to kind of hold your effort the entire way. I'm trying to be steady with it, and you know, my cadence has been pretty reasonable. Probably the one thing I would redo, and you know, I actually didn't record this as a independent segment. This was just my ride from whenever we started, 9:30 in the morning. So what I probably would do again is try and set up my bike computer to show my average wattage for the ride, and just start my bike computer as I'm kind of like, you know, 5-10 seconds before the start time, and that'll give me, or that would kind of give me a good idea of like what time I'm going up the segment, because I wouldn't have to do it as a lapped time. I could just do it as a ride time, and also you'd be able to like set up a average wattage, and you know, 5-10 seconds before you go over the speed bump at the bottom, the last speed bump at the bottom. Yeah, I think you could probably get away with like averaging out over the 35-40 minutes, whatever it takes to do it, you know, a very good idea of what your average wattage would be, because those 5-10 seconds would be negligible. So that's probably what I would do again. Is I definitely have my my cadence, or certainly my heart rate and my speed, but then I'd like to have my heart rate and my wattage, my current wattage, but I would like to ride this with an average wattage as well. So those are probably the three like key metrics that I would do again. Obviously having an elapsed time for the segment would be great, which is why I think starting it just before you go over the start line and having a running time. But like I said, that has no relevance to me. I've got no idea, like I've got no idea how far up the climb I am here. I do actually have a Garmin Edge that has Climb Pro, which would give you all like a ton of information about it, like how long to the finish. I think that would be like a good thing to use. But my Garmin 1040 Edge is just a bigger bike computer, and I've been running the slightly smaller IGPSport bike computer. Anyway, I didn't find that, you know, the bike computer. This is the corner with the photographer. Here you go on the right. You can see him snapping away a few pics and a wave. He obviously has a great time. I imagine his tan by the end of the year is absolutely fantastic. We are like, sorry, to dive back into the bike computer thing. Yes, I'd probably set it up with wattage, elapsed time, heart rate, which I found very key. I did keep an eye on my heart rate. I think, you know, 160 is probably where it is now. It's probably a little bit low. I think I could probably hold a slightly higher heart rate, push a little bit more. Certainly if it wasn't warm. If it was warm, I probably wouldn't be able to, or if it was any hotter than it is. I think that's kind of what brings my heart rate down, is that you know, I get hot and I have to slow things down, I have to be a bit more measured with it. But I definitely have wattage, elapsed time, heart rate, and then average wattage for the ride, and I'd start the segment, or start the ride at the bottom as a fresh file, and then that way you'd have like a really good idea of kind of what your average wattage is as you go up the climb, because that's what I didn't know. I only have my current wattage, so that's kind of one thing I definitely think would be beneficial. If I had my average wattage on screen, I held 308 watts for the 36 minutes 45 seconds that it took me to do this climb. Now if that 308 or that 305 or 310 or whatever it was on my screen as we went up the climb, I think it would just kind of help me kind of be a bit more goal orientated. So if I'd set it at 310, you know, I think I probably would have been able to nudge out those 2 extra watts on an average over the course of the climb. You know, if you were kind of thinking, oh, I want to hold 315, you know, having a goal and being able to kind of meet it, you kind of need the information to make those decisions. So 100%, I think next time I do this, I'm going to have an average wattage for the climb, as a few guys like cheekily cut the corner on the way down, which I've got no kind of qualms with, guys. Enjoy your ride down, because on the way back up, it's going to hurt. But yeah, having an average wattage and trying to like vaguely, roughly plan this, and I'd say plan it based on, you know, what your, well, rough FTP is, you know, kind of how fit you feel. Just have a rough idea of, you know, what do you reckon you can put in for like a 35 or 30, 35, 40 minute, 45 minute effort, whatever it's you think it might take you, and look at your friends' times, because I definitely did that. Looked at a few of my friends, tons of them were coming up with like 35, 36 minutes. I was like, okay, well, that kind of puts me, based on riding with these guys, you know, reasonably knowing them as cyclists, that puts me within that bracket. So, and then I was kind of trying to work out, well, if I was to be riding for 35 minutes, you know, knowing that my FTP was 290, could I hold 305, 310 for the 35 minutes rather than 290 for 60 minutes? So that was my thinking. That's how I based my effort. And obviously, you know, maybe just like chuck a little extra fat on the top. So I wanted to hold 310, but I think in my head, or sorry, kind of on paper, I was like, well, try and hold 305. But then in my head, I was like, be brave, be stupid, go for the 310. And then it washed out at 308, which I can't really complain about. I think if I dropped a little bit of weight, I'll, you know, for some reason, I don't know what it is. I think basically during the winter, spending all my time on the turbo trainer, I don't end up losing that much weight, because all my turbo trainer rides are like maybe 60 minutes. At the most, they're like 120 minutes, 2-hour rides. I very rarely do kind of like longer than 2-hour turbo rides. So I'm not really kind of losing any body weight, like my muscular weight is not disappearing. Whereas Easter weekend, this weekend, I went out for like a 6-hour ride. And those are the days when, you know, my body will start, or some of my muscles will go into a little bit of atrophy, just six hours of just out cycling. And you just end up losing body weight in terms of like muscular weight. And guys, I have a certain body type that's slightly different. I come from a power sport background, used to play professional rugby, so my body really does hold on to muscle way more than like I guess a lot of other, I want to say like endurance based athletes, because I find it really hard to drop weight. All I do is run and cycle. I do no kind of like weightlifting, no like very little gym work, which I need to change. Actually, I need to do some kind of leg based gym work. But I don't lose that much kind of muscle. And in actual fact, over the winter, like my legs have actually got bigger just from doing like tons of Zwift work and doing tons of workouts, because I'm not doing those longer 5, 6, 7 hour efforts on the weekends. So this is probably the most iconic part of the Calobra climb, which is the corkscrew up at the top as you go under the bridge and loop back round on yourself. And it kind of creeps up on you as you kind of get most of, or you've got all of the switchbacks out the way. Now, guys, we're only like 3 minutes, 15 seconds from the top of this climb, and which, you know, we cover this reasonably quickly, or it certainly feels that way. So this is the bit where, you know, you can't see it from my GoPro because it's mounted just underneath my bike computer, but the view from up here is insane. You might be able to see a little bit as we come past this like side of the road, and you can actually see a bit more, but you can see the entire climb and it absolutely looks gorgeous. The sun has come out to play, so it's a little bit warmer. I'm like dying a little bit of a death as my kind of heart rate comes down, but then I remind myself that we're coming to this like iconic location. Here it goes, the corkscrew kind of coming back underneath itself, under the bridge. And there is nothing, you know, you can't not get a little bit carried away in this section and just try and put on a few extra watts. You can taste the finish. Like a lot of, like the difficult thing is, and guys, I apologize, I creep over to the left a little bit, but you do have a very good view of all the road and the car and the cyclists coming down. So I probably creeped a little bit too far left, my bad. But nonetheless, I think, well, that makes up for it. A cyclist just kind of cutting right across the road in front of me, which is cool. We're all good. Everyone's having a good time. but you are kind of like mentally you're finished here, as in like you feel like this is the top of Calobra, but in actual fact the reality is it's just not. You've got this extra, I want to say like maybe just under maybe 600 meters to go before the finish, and you can see on the horizon like that little ridge line is basically the end of the climb, and you got to get up in between the rocks for it to officially finish. I'm putting in like a bit of extra effort as my heart rate starts climbing, 165, 166, touching that kind of like death zone, which is like 171, 172, which I'm not sure whether I get into, because this is probably the point when, you know, the animals amongst us, you know, really start taking the bit between their teeth and kick. I think I probably do, like, yes, here I do start trying to put a bit of a kick in, but then I realize I've probably gone too early for like who I am as a cyclist. I can't kick for that amount of time. It'd basically be like a minute of like super high wattage. I just didn't have that left in my legs. The timer on this video is a little bit out because I think it might have started a little bit earlier, so we're not going to sweat that, but I end up with 36:45. But at some point I do kind of realize that, you know, the finish line is kind of within my grasp, so I do have to put the extra effort in. My heart rate is growing and increasing steadily, so, you know, if you are coming up to this, just be aware that, you know, don't kick too early. It's probably like if you're doing this during the summer, you're going to be baking hot because you're really exposed to the sunshine. You're obviously at the top, and at some point you do want to put that kick in, and there we go, look, a few kind of 400 watt odd kicks, and then here we go. Like, I think I do start just trying to hold a few extra watts as we kick in through the finish. You can literally see the finish line now, which is effectively like the road moving between the two rock faces, or the sides of the rocks. And I just want to push through 169. I think I might touch 170, or probably did touch 170 coming up and over. There we go, 170. I actually don't know I didn't know where the exact finish point was, so the best thing I could do was ride all the way through. And there we go, that's me done. Like I said, 36:45. Don't stop too early, guys. Like, try and ride it through the cliffs just to be sure. Just like, you'd be super annoyed if you end up kind of getting to the top and it kind of goes a bit awry. Thanks for joining, guys. I will see you hopefully on another one or a race soon.